Thank you. I'm Louisa Prosky, co-artistic director of Heartbeat. Welcome, everyone.
And I'm Jacob Ashworth, co-music director.
I'm Dan Schlossberg, the other co-music director.
Hi, I'm Annie Middleton. I'm the managing director.
Annie's new this week. Welcome, Annie. I'm Ethan Hurd, co-artistic director. Welcome to The Secret Sauce. It is a thrill to see so many familiar faces here with us tonight. 7 years ago to the week, believe it or not, Louisa and I went to see a show together at BAM, and we left at intermission. But we went to dinner, and with Aperol spritzes in hand, we decided to found an opera company. We were fresh out of grad school and had radical ideas about how to make opera more accessible and more relevant. We invited Dan and Jacob, who had formed the vocal instrumental ensemble Cantata Profana, to join us. And moments before filming our very first fundraising video, with a little bit of trepidation that our name was too cheesy, we chose the name Heartbeat Opera.
Well, I remember arguing about it a lot, and I do think that we grew into the name. At first, I think we named the company Heartbeat because we wanted to make essential, visceral opera. I also remember thinking about the fascinating scientific study about heartbeats in an audience synchronizing when audiences watch theatrical performances. But I think now, 7 years later, the name has come to mean many things for us, including performances that cut to the heart of the matter, productions that take the pulse of these old pieces, and of course, that make your heart race.
So tonight we are here to celebrate our first 7 years as a company and to kick off our 7th season. But like you, we're living in this crazy 2020 moment, and we are processing the challenges of this time. The loss of our loved ones, the loss of opportunities, of togetherness. And we also want to honor the ongoing fight for racial justice in this country and for democracy itself. As art makers, we believe it's our responsibility to speak truth to power and to create beauty. And we know that joy nourishes resilience. This is my mantra these days. And we need resilience more than ever. So while we do miss the magic of being in real space with you, we're also thrilled to share the miracle of this virtual space. So to fully arrive together, I invite us all to feel our feet on the ground. Maybe close your eyes if that feels good, or look at the beautiful faces on the screen. And just take a few deep breaths together. Thank you so much.
During our first virtual project, Lady M, we loved your inquisitive, passionate questions about our creative process. So that's why we created The Secret Sauce, to share the special ingredients and the unique recipes that make Heartbeat, Heartbeat. Over the past weeks, we've had a lot of fun diving into our video archive and pulling out our favorite scenes. So tonight we have 4 videos to share with you and to discuss. But first, over to Jacob for some housekeeping.
Hi, everybody. If anybody still has a little bit of Zoom trepidation, don't worry. We are going to take very good care of you. But there are 3 things that I need you all to do. Some of you who were here the other nights might know this deal already, and you might have to get off your couch to do it. But first, I'd like you to turn off your videos. That's in your bottom left corner. Secondly, you can click on the square that had your name in it and click Hide Non-Video Participants in the drop-down menu. Then, if you go to the top right and click on Gallery View, you should be able to see just the Heartbeat team and our special guest on your screen. Siobhan is chatting those instructions to you right now. At the end of the show, we're going to ask you to turn your videos on again when we go into our breakout rooms for our talkback. So please do keep jotting down your questions as we go. And if you have any issues at all with Zoom as we're going along tonight, you can always message our house manager, Siobhan, by using the chat feature. And speaking of that feature, Siobhan is going to chat you the running order for tonight right now.
We would like to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate the hundreds of artists and other collaborators who brought all of the work you will see and hear to life. And I want to shout out to Beth, Taylor, Kelly, Daniel, Mona, Russ, Leah, Nico, and Seychelle, and Siobhan, who are here tonight. Heartbeat Opera is a family, and these artists are not only featured in tonight's videos, but they also built this company with us. And now we've prepared a short video to catch you up on all the opera we've made in our first 7 years. Without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce our guest this evening, Jeanine Tesori, although she truly needs no introduction, as the Tony Award-winning composer of Fun Home, Caroline or Change, and Thoroughly Modern Millie, as well as the celebrated opera Blue, about the shooting of an unarmed black teenager, recently premiered at the Glimmerglass Festival. Her work has twice been named finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, and she is one of the first 2 women to be commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera. Jeanine is also the founder of the arts-based leadership program A Broader Way, and Heartbeat actually had the pleasure of working with young women from that program in the very first year of our existence, and we will be working with them again this fall. I've actually had the immense privilege of knowing Jeanine for quite a while at this point. She came to Ethan's Yale School of Drama thesis, Sunday in the Park with George, which was actually one of my earliest orchestration projects. And then I took Jeanine's first composition class at Yale, and most recently, I worked with her on Steven Spielberg's forthcoming West Side Story. Welcome, Jeanine.
Oh, it's so great. Cheers. This is all vodka. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm so excited to be here. I'm, as everybody knows, I'm an incredible Heartbeat opera fan. I think my new title should be EKG. That's what I would call myself. I think that Heartbeat Opera, and I think all of you have changed the conversation about opera, or rather continue the conversation when we when opera was concerned with gods and monsters, and then the gods and monsters within us, when we showed real people in real situations. And I think what everybody at Heartbeat has done is actually plunked ourselves in an inevitable space of the epic nature that is human life. So, you know, every time I go, you're very aware of the musicians. You're aware that there are human beings. There's not a fourth wall. It's like it's not even saran wrap. We are in the same space together. And I really look to this as the future of building a different conversation. The arts program that I helped to create for young leaders, I will never forget the looks on their faces, because a lot of them had never heard opera, but they didn't understand why they should be listening to it. And the looks on their faces when, you know, these women were singing, and especially for young women, they're so often at risk for not using their voice. That's why a lot of women are incarcerated. So to have these women singing with diaphragms that you could drive a truck over, it was an unforgettable day. It was momentous. They still talk about it. And there was an involvement there, because if we don't lead these young people to encourage them to see what might be unavailable, they won't do it on their own. I don't know many 8-year-olds who you think, I'm so excited about opera. There are some out there, but that's what happened that day for hundreds of young women. And that means that it will continue. And I know that Jacob was saying that there's a continuation with Heartbeat and a broader way that will happen this fall. So I'm just thrilled to be here. And Jacob, I don't know if you want to talk about that, or we'll just go back to Louisa.
Well, we'll mention it a bit later, but it's just, we're very excited because today we sort of signed and sealed that a little bit, so we can actually announce that, yes, we are going to be partnering again this fall.
See how I went away from the script there? So.
You
Okay,
did.
so let's get to it, Louisa.
Yeah, I think let's just start with sharing our first video, and then we'll get into conversation. I just want to say this one thing before we start the videos, which is that you know, if your internet is tricky or whatever, and your video ends up being a bit choppy, do not worry, because we'll send a folder with all of the videos that we're showing this week out at the end of the week to everyone who attended, so you can rewatch them at your leisure. But let's start with Carmen. So a little bit about this. I want to take you back to 2016, when we were in design for Carmen and the elections happened. And, you know, I threw out all of our early ideas and basically started from scratch. Something that really shocked me was Trump's obsession with building a border wall. And it sort of took me back to thinking about my own childhood in West Berlin, when a wall was separating one half of my family from the other. What if Carmen was a border story? So many borders run through this piece: political, cultural, sexual, and they all converge in the opera's combustible center, which is the violent, volatile relationship between Carmen and Don Jose. Dan arranged the score for a band of saxophone, drum set, bass, piano, guitars, and violin. So here is the last scene of our 2017 Carmen.
Non, je ne t'aime plus.
I mean, there's so many things to say, so I think I'm just going to start with, I don't know, my heart races when I see these productions, and I feel they bubble over with response, they bubble over with very few things make me want to write. I deplore writing. Any writer who says to me, I can't wait to get back to my score pad, I think, liar. But when I see these productions, I do have this need to respond. And so one of the things, Luisa, I want to talk to you is about disruption. The use of the cell phone, to me, which is also, yes, it's very witty in some way, it has an edge to it, but it itself is a disruption using themes that we see in this buttoned up world as when someone's cell phone goes off during an opera on a show. There's the death stare that you get because you're a human being, and it has happened to everybody. We live in fear of the unwrapped candy to the point that we have to make an announcement. So the first, like sirens, that is part of life. Life is being lived. And this production, when we talk about disruption, I wonder, Luisa, if you can tell us about dealing with repertoire and when you disrupt a classic by providing a new context, like what you do with the habanera at the end. What do you think is, when repertoire stands on its own and when it meets the moment, and looking at form and thinking about that? Can you give us your thoughts about it?
I'll try to be brief. I mean, there's so much to say. I think you know, when you do something like Carmen, it's such an iconic piece that you're as much in conversation with the characters, the themes, the place, the music, as with its iconicness itself. And I think it's sort of this elephant in the room that you have to deal with. And so, you know, I think in many ways, one of my big impulses was that there's so much about Carmen that was shocking and provocative when it was first performed. The fact that there's a gypsy, a foreign woman on stage, the fact that there's a bullfight at the end that is sort of ingeniously woven into this relationship scene. And I think a lot of these things now have become stale and cliched, and like the Spanishness of the opera, the flamenco dresses, the red dress, you know, are like, they're safe, like they're actually safe things because you expect them. And so I think one of the tasks as directors, you know, is that we have to plug into what made the piece disruptive in the first place. When something becomes a masterpiece, it's sort of hard to go back to the time before it was a masterpiece, when it really rattled people. And so that was one big desire we had with this production. And so the cell phone, I mean, God, I had such anxiety about it because it can be so hokey to have cell phones on stage, but it really became this kind of emotional object because it plays the music that is usually the offstage bullfight. So it sort of was dealing with the question of how do you make this scene that is usually a grand opera scene with a chorus of 70 off stage and the toreador singing, how do you make that into an intimate scene? And so the cell phone sort of became this, you know, naughty stand-in for that. But also for me, I mean, in the last scene, I really wanted to talk about, you know, violence within relationships and to sort of take all this cliche off the scene of like, oh, Carmen has a death wish and she really wants to die and she's opening her arms to the knife. And I was like, no, actually, she is a creature who is full of life and she has moved on and Don Jose has not. And so I was looking for sort of a hook for really feeling this truth about the scene, which is that she is in a situation, in a scene that she doesn't want to be in, and she's trying to get out. And I think this idea of like a woman who's using a cell phone as the lifeline to try to call her friends because she doesn't feel safe with a man who's snapped, felt very visceral to me. And so that is what the cell phone became. And I think the gesture of throwing the cell phone over the fence sort of was, I think when we found that in rehearsal with Seychelle, our wonderful Carmen who's here tonight, and Chloe, our amazing choreographer, it was sort of this moment of, oh, okay, this is the point of no return. Her cell phone's gone, so she can't escape.
You know, it's interesting to hear you speak about that. And I know that we don't have a ton of time, but I'm really going to encourage everybody to look at these videos. I took a weekend of heartbreak about heartbeat, because you really get into the camera work with it. Often the most dangerous things are the most quiet. And a cell phone to me is also can be a time bomb. It's what we're always taught about a 911 call for help. And I think it was very interesting in terms of the instrumentation when you think about jazz being infused inside, you know, jazz being introduced in France because of the war and Black Americans. So there, you have all these things working at something. And the thing that I really love about this company is your complete love of the form to the point that you want to disrupt it. It doesn't come to me, and I don't know, you know, we can talk more about this. It doesn't come to me of this arrogance. It comes from such a love that you want people to go forward in time by going backwards to try to imagine what it was like to see it for the first time. Because I do think, Louisa, and everybody here, we do get shellacked with what the expectation is. And that to me is nostalgia, which has a beautiful place. And sometimes you do want to see a traditional form, but we can't have that be the only one. That is a museum. For me, that is not what, we are not meant to be mummified. And Dan, I wonder if you can also just quickly discuss about the choice to make the jazz combo in this, which was really a courageous choice.
Yeah, I mean, as Louisa said, it's a classic. I know this is a piece that I've loved since I was very, very little. And these are standards. And so I thought, given Louise's concept for this, and we were going between French and English, English speaking and French singing, we wanted kind of a through line, and underneath the dialogues, we kind of developed this underscoring that was actually kind of improvised in the realm of a jazz. So, and we put this ensemble together, which included the incredible saxophonist Louise's husband, Michael, and he was actually improvising in the final scene. As you heard, once the music started going really fast, he was kind of doing a lot of blah, 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 blah. And so that was stuff that I just kind of encouraged him to do. And I felt like it really responded to the action on stage. At some point, the band actually went on stage, and Johnny, the percussionist, played the border fence. That just kind of came out in rehearsal. I was like on top of the guard post with a accordion. Our guitarist was also up there. So it was really the idea of a band in every sense. I think that was what I was kind of striving for.
I want to see the whole thing all over again. I'm going to hand it off to Ethan, and we're going to go to our next video.
Great. So in 2018, we presented Beethoven's Fidelio, and it featured the voices of 100 incarcerated singers from 6 prison choirs across the Midwest. And our version envisions Florestan as Stan, a Black Lives Matter activist who is disappeared by a white supremacist prison warden. Stan's wife, Leah, disguises herself as a correctional officer to infiltrate the prison where she believes her husband is wrongfully incarcerated. In the original opera, Leonora disguises herself as a man, Fidelio, and the jailer's daughter falls in love with her. But in our contemporary version, Leah doesn't need to pretend to be a man to work at the prison, but she does need to pretend to be a lesbian to seduce Marcy, the daughter of Rock, the deputy major. So here's our excerpt.
Not at all.
Is something on your mind?
I'm thinking about these men behind bars. We haven't let some of them out in the yard for weeks.
The warden took away privileges because of the riot in the cafeteria.
And you know as well as I do, it was just a fist fight between a few of the inmates. A lockdown is extreme. Besides, people need sunlight and air. Cooping them up is not going to help anything.
It's not up to us. The warden's in charge.
But you are the deputy major's daughter. You could pop the lock.
No, I can't. What are you saying?
Look, your dad is with the warden now. They usually meet for at least an hour. What if we let some of the men out into the yard for just a few minutes? They're not livestock, Marcy. They deserve better.
What about the other guards?
If you say the warden ordered it, they'll trust you.
Honey, are you crazy? I can't risk my job like this.
They are people, Marcy. People who made mistakes. Some people whose only mistake was being poor, or...
Reed, I wish I could help you. I'm so sorry.
Please, do it for me.
Does this mean you're asking me out?
It depends.
Fine. 30 minutes. I'll make sure my dad doesn't come this way. Attention all guards. Cell block A, B, C, and D. The warden grants all inmates 30 minutes of outside rec in the yard starting now. Unlock automatic doors in blocks 135, 136, 137, 138, 139.
You know, I watched it this weekend, and I think that we're all in a state of, you know, watching our country and what's happening. And it is the first time that I was able to just let myself fall apart. Because the thing that I really love, and Ethan, I would love to get your impulse behind this. The thing that this production does is it reminds us that there are not just walls. You know, we talked about, Luis, you talked about the walls and border, but there are the walls that you put human beings behind. And just because you put them behind there doesn't mean that they're not there. And why solitary confinement is a form of torture because of the connection. And this idea, as Brian Stevenson said, are we going to be defined by the worst things that we have ever done? And looking inside this prison industrial complex, Ethan, and allowing the dignity of human beings who reside there. This rescue opera, there are rescue operas at the beginning of the 1800s, and this one is, to me, the greatest of them all. I'm wondering where this came from for you and the fire to do this production.
Well, it did connect to Trump's election as well. For me, I wanted to respond as a person and an artist. And I remembered Fidelio from grad school because it was assigned in our set design class. And I had seen a lot of my colleagues design prisons and design Florestan's solitary confinement space. And we started talking about it as a team and wondered how we would do the prisoners chorus. And we asked ourselves, could we reach out to prison choirs? And Dan knew a prison choir conductor in Minnesota. And we reached out to Amanda, and she connected us to other conductors in the Midwest. And the project grew gradually, slowly, organically, at the speed of trust, as I've come to learn and call it. And we miraculously, I still think it's a miracle that 6 prison choirs came on board and so generously participated and gave of themselves for this project. And I learned so much and continue to because of this collaboration, which I'm grateful to say is ongoing. We have new work coming up with these choirs and these folks, but the letters that we exchanged with them and just getting to, I was saying to my partner, Stanley, who's sitting here, I was holding the camera. It was just Dan and me, visiting these rehearsals, and I was sort of learning the video camera at the same time. But dignity is the word, Jeanine. I mean, seeing person by person how music and harmony and singing in a weekly choir is such an act of dignity and doing something beautiful and good together. And that was one of the most moving letters that we received from these participants is an incarcerated singer saying, I wrote to my mom, I wrote to my family saying, I'm participating in something beautiful, and I'm giving back. And that, I couldn't have anticipated that, but it was a really profound experience.
I think that this incredibly scrappy, should never have happened opera company has really revealed what is possible when the idea is the greatest thing, when the why is at the center of everything that you do. The invitation at the end of any kind of policy, at the end of an eighth note, is a human being playing it or singing it. And I think opera has suffered in the past from forgetting that there was a time when those notes were not made. And that moment of creation, that act of faith, it brings us back to that. And I'm just so, I'm really moved anew by that at a time right now where our country is literally on fire. It is an act of faith. It's a kind of musical gardening to say, these are not just ideas that are going to be one and done. These are programs. This is a movement. Heartbeat opera is a movement. I would sort of love to move on to this idea of drag. And Dan, if you could introduce this next excerpt, then I have some thoughts.
Thank you, Jeanine. Sure. So Heartbeat's Halloween drag show has been an annual tradition since our very first season. Each of the 6 shows that we created has a theme, from Mozart in space to Shakespeare to climate change, and features a genre-defined pastiche of songs and arias from Claudio Monteverdi to Aretha Franklin and back again. This excerpt that you're going to see is from Dragus Maximus, a Homer sexual opera odyssey, our Greco-Roman orgy of gorgeous gladiators and glam goddesses. This was a particularly special program because I got to write a brand new piece called Feed the Snakes in collaboration with renowned librettist Royce Favrick. It was also a showcase for our incredible costume designer, Mio Gabernick. Jamie Lynn Manning-White plays Medusa in a cholera tour de force as she attempts to capture Homer, her next victim, or so she thinks. The punchline.
I mean, that was amazing. Oh my God. That it fires on all levels. I mean, also when that happens, it just fires on all levels all the time. I have to say it, one of the, I don't know if it's a Heidi or one of those notes, my dog leapt up. I want to talk about two things. Why I feel like this is a great example that encapsulates what you are all after in terms of the pistons that are firing for the eye, for the ear, for it's sexual, it's provocative, it's in tune. I mean, all of those things, the musicianship level, you know, when we meet the ambition with skill, that to me is this point of achievement that is, I try to do that, but it's rare. And so Jacob, I'm going to sort of send some things your way, and then we can, as my students say, popcorn. Why you think that one could think that this is such a great example of what's at the heart of Heartbeat, and the relationship of drag and opera to me is, from Pants Rolls On, is a provocative topic. So any of those or both of those things, can you start us off discussing that?
Well, we started our first drag show was Purcell's Fairy Queen, which, you know, we probably were mostly drawn to it because we were eating Korean fried chicken and the title really fit. You know, and that was probably all we went on at the beginning, right? We didn't have a ton of forethought going into that first season. But as soon as we started, we were like, wow, Baroque opera and drag are actually kind of the same thing. And of course, that is not our discovery, I have to say. That is, and especially in Europe, a lot of opera houses have been telling us that for a very long time. But it was so much fun to discover that, and then to translate that into much, much more that we can do. And I think you're right about it being sort of the heart of what we're all about. We talk about the drag shows for our audience as this, we call it our gateway drug. We love to try to attract as many opera virgins as possible to come and see these shows and then sort of get their way into opera. But for us on the producing side, it's almost uncanny the way it's been this workshop for us. And we'll do a piece like, you know, Mozart in space, and do Mozart, and then suddenly the next year we're doing Don Giovanni, and it's like, wow, actually it's pretty similar. And it's not like what we're doing in our production is that much different than what we were doing in our drag show. The outlandish qualities that we find a real home in a real production when you get as dramatic as you can be. And we did Shakespeare, and we did Lady M, and then that in a drag show, All the World's a Drag, and then that turned into Lady M later, and a lot of other evolutions like that. But in terms of opera itself, opera is it's over the top, and it's everything you can possibly put on stage. And the human voice is asked throughout opera to become so many things, either a different gender, or a monster, or a child, or an old. Every singer is asked to be so much more than just whatever they physically and their age and everything is. So it's not that much more of a step to say you can really explode that to be whatever you want.
And this can be for anybody. Year 7, as many deadly sins as there are days of the week, the time when a lot of marriages fall apart, but this one isn't. I'm wondering, what are you where you thought you would be 7 years ago? And this is for anybody. In your relationship to opera, in your relationship to the response, whatever that question means.
I was saying to my partner Stanley earlier, this has been an emotional couple of days, just kicking off The Secret Sauce and looking at this catalog of videos, because I could not have imagined we would be here. I mean, certainly not in a pandemic on Zoom, but
Jeanine Tesori.
yes, talking to Jeanine, exactly. I mean, it was baby steps that have now built something larger than us and larger than we could have imagined. I mean, I'm so humbled and inspired that you use the word movement, because it does feel like a large family, a community, and it has its own momentum. I think Heartbeat has its own pulse and momentum. I want to talk about drag a little bit more though, because I wanted to respond to your question, Jeanine. And I give a shout out to my friend Tom, who's in the audience tonight. We were talking about drag and opera actually years before Heartbeat began. It was a seed in my brain, and I love drag, and I think it's about fabulousness and virtuosity, and you know, Jacob used the word over the top for sure, but this like larger than life color, saturation, and skill. I mean, I think drag to me embodies this reverence for form and execution in costume, in look, in strut, in singing, in lip syncing, and irreverence and campiness and not taking yourself too seriously. And it's so freeing when we put these drag shows on and opera singers get to show off their skill, but not be worried about Avery Fisher Hall and Carnegie Hall and pearls and heels and being perfect. You know, they get to be cheered and catcalled like the stars they are.
Yeah, and along with that, you know, it's rare that people would be cheering in a contemporary piece of classical music, let alone a premiere of one. And just to have her, Jamie Lynn, sing the high note that I gave her to lead, which is no easy feat. She walks out on stage and belts out a high C sharp. And then people just applaud, and, you know, because it's kind of like applauding the set, applauding the costume, applauding like this crazy sound coming out of her. But it's really thrilling for me. You know, I'm not someone who wants to shut people up while I listen to my music that I've heard zillions of times myself, you know, for an audience. Like people having reactions during the piece, laughs, like that's exactly right. I think that's totally in the spirit of the show and kind of what we do in general with operas like Carmen or, you know, whatever it is. So it was very thrilling to have her do that and to have a reaction like that, personally.
And I just want to add that I think Jamie Lynn like learned this aria in a week or maybe a week and a half, which is like for anybody who knows zero, it's like minus 100 times for an opera singer to learn a new piece of music. And I think it's just because we have some singers with us tonight in the audience too. It's this amazing tribute to how game our singers are to kind of jump into the deep end of the pool, like, you know, Seychelle and Carmen rolling around on the floor while singing. And, you know, I think.
But that's also, I do want to say, along what you're saying, you're creating a structure in which that we are human beings. We are not Parkers and Barkers. And I say we in that we to reveal the humanity as it always has been. And in terms of opera, when conductors used to be like Toscanini was asked to duel backstage because he refused for an encore to happen. I mean, can you imagine that happening at that? You know, so I think there's the YAs, the opera singer now, they can act and they can move and they bring pencils with erasers, you know, or unless they're on iPads. And I remember, you know, so it's not this idea that it's calcified, that it's alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to go back to the other question, and I think maybe others want to jump into because it's such a great question about where we are and where we thought we would be. You know, last night in the talkback, a young woman said, "We're about to start an opera company in Portland. Do you have any advice for us?" I was like, okay, we need 10 hours. But the one thing I said to her, you know, was that I think something I'm very proud of with Heartbeat is that we really took our time to define who we are. And I would say we still haven't defined who we are. You know, we didn't have a mission statement for like the first 2 years. We didn't have a logo for the first 3 years. We really sort of let the work and the collaboration between the four of us, and then of course, all the wonderful designers and singers who have shaped the company, take the lead. And, you know, something like a project like Fidelio has changed the DNA of the company. It changed all of us. Like I didn't direct it, but it changed me. It changed my idea of art making. And I would say that's true for a number of projects, maybe every project that we've done, you know. And so I think like we had no idea where we would be. And I think that sort of something that's humbling about this moment, which is such a, I mean, I cannot overstate what a perilous moment this is for live arts with the pandemic, you know, is that it's, I mean, the only thing to do, I think, is to let it change us and to use this moment to sort of ask the big questions that I think the opera industry needs to ask of itself in terms of our relationship to society, our relationship to the present moment. And so I think you're looking at the four of us like changing in front of your eyes because we're figuring it out like baby steps day by day.
I think I'll just jump in and also get us onto our next clip here a little bit, but definitely the drag show also began as much more, it was celebration, and we weren't even sure at the beginning whether it was a fundraiser or if it was a show. It was a little bit like in this murky ground, and we actually got a lot of feedback from people saying, what was that, or what is that I'm about to see? And then after a while we started realizing, well, actually, like, budget-wise, it looks like a show, and it sounds like a show, and if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck. And then it became this and a big thing, and the last year when we did Hot Mama, it was about climate change, and it actually, all of our political work that we've been doing in other pieces worked its way into that. And I think similarly, our fuller productions have also evolved. And so the next thing we're about to watch is from Der Freischütz. And Der Freischütz was the epitome of a passion project for us. It was a huge endeavor that we thought about for years, and then finally we seemed like, I think we're able to do it now. And so at the heart of the piece is the Wolf Canyon scene, which is this terrifying phantasmagoria full of virtuosic orchestral writing. And Dan and all of us, we were aiming to bust Carl Maria von Weber's avant-garde vision out of those 19th century confines and into the 21st century. And so Dan partnered with a wonderful colleague of ours named William Gardner to create a new electronic score, which was also blasted through surround speaker system all around and combined with an amplified band. It was also very fun for Dan and me because for one of the first times we got to be in the same band together. So at the beginning of our Wolf Canyon scene that you're about to watch, you'll hear the electronics along with many different unconventional sounds coming from the band itself and the amplified voices of canyon spirits from our chorus singing backstage. Kaspar conjures Zamiel, in our version, played by the extraordinary Buto dancer Azumi Oi, to make the proverbial deal with the devil.
tomorrow. No. Who are they? What does he want? With 6 the 7th makes you a fool. I have no part of her yet. We'll see. Fine. By the gates of hell. Tomorrow. Him or me.
Well, look at what that did to my dog. My dog is like clinging on for dear life, terrified. I was there in that audience, and I think that terror and horror have been so long the domain of. Thank you for the tale. The domain of film. It was one of those times where I thought, oh my God, there's so much restraint. Freischütz, as we know, was done. I think there were many productions happening in London, maybe 6 productions, and there was a lot being thrown at it with this kind of blood curdling and that, but it was terrifying in its restraint. Something so simple as a mouth being lit. I lived in a lighthouse for a year, and there was nothing more terrifying than the darkness and hearing a sound or one light. And that was the first time you sort of imagined what the German, the land there, that's what was being constructed. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how these abstract ideas, the theatricality of these productions, how did that become, it seems to me as someone outside the company, that it's become a hallmark of this exquisite lighting. I mean, Azumi OE was terrifying because I didn't have a box with which to understand what I was watching. It was coming at me from all directions. And the surround sound is, to me, a great metaphor of saying, I'm going to pull from everything, but I'm not going to throw the whole toolbox at it. I'm going to pick and choose. And that I find that's consistent in terms of the productions. And how did that come about in terms of the work itself?
Yeah, I think this is sort of a great bridge from our last conversation, because the drag shows actually have also become this sort of interdisciplinary playground where we've really pushed ourselves to work with artists from other fields, like jazz musicians, improvisers, dancers. And so actually, there was this beautiful saying that our teacher in grad school used, which is, all the filings are drawn to the magnet of your obsession. And if you're in preparation for directing a production, you become obsessed with it, for better or worse. It's a great joy and a great suffering of the director, I think. And so for weeks, I was like really tortured about this question of who to cast as this kind of weird character, Zamiel, who's a devil, but like he does some good, and the good person, the sort of the other pole, the hermit, actually has a lot of evil in him, so it's quite dialectic in the piece. And I didn't want to make it simple, and I was like, do I cast an actor? Do I cast a you know, a dancer, a child at some point we thought about. And then my husband went to see this like underground improvised jazz performance in Brooklyn one night and described to me this terrifying dancer who just like appeared out of nowhere with an LED light in her mouth and absolutely freaked everyone out by her presence, just by the kind of strangeness and intensity of her presence in the room. And I heard that description and I was like, oh my God, who is this woman? Give me her number. I need her. That's Zamiel. And so, you know, sure enough, I found her. Asumi is this amazing Buto dancer, Buto trained dancer. And then it sort of like started to fall into place because Buto, you know, is this movement vocabulary that came really out of the experience of Hiroshima and the nuclear bomb in Japan. So it's sort of dealing with what is humanity after an evil of unimaginable magnitude. And since the piece, the Freischütz, deals with evil, what is evil in our midst, you know, it sort of felt perfect to have a Buto dancer explore that. And Asumi really, you know, it was improvised, so it was different every night. It was a total wild card. She had never worked with opera singers before, so she really kept us on our toes, but at the same time, she brought such a discipline and an extraordinary presence that she really, once again, changed us and our working method.
I'm interested in the refrain that the ritornello that keeps coming up for me is response. I worked with a choreographer once when I was, you know, 5 years old, and he had written everything out on a legal pad. And that was the way that he could control the creation. He worked it out on a legal pad on his body and then came in and put it on his dancers as if he were putting on a raincoat on them. And I watched it and I remember thinking, remember this and do the opposite. So that the response to what is happening will shift. The thing that I always teach, and I do want to take a class with your graduate, with that professor, is that if it happens for one, it happens for all. If you're lucky, deny that at your peril. So that the narrative functions, one character on stage, everyone who is backstage, it's happening to them too. Everybody moves forward. You're going down the river together. And I think the response that you're talking about of you see this in Brooklyn, you see this on the subway, that's what feels to me, like has become also a hallmark of the response. And in this moment, where does it make you seeing something like this production and Lady M? How do you think it relates to where you want to be in a year with the proper funding?
Well, I want to riff on that idea, Jeanine, of response, because I think another thing that we responded to in the opera industry when we were founding Heartbeat was compartmentalization and hierarchy, where we felt like big, expensive opera was limiting creativity because folks were in their lane and they had to obey and stay in their union and stay in their orchestra pit and fly in and fly out. And there wasn't true, deep, ongoing collaboration. And that actually the resources at some, you know, sometimes I think at a place like the Met, and we love the Met, but it can also create great challenges because things are being designed and produced years in advance, and it is harder to respond. So we were joking about the word nimble before the soiree started tonight, but I do think there's a flexibility and a response that we want to cultivate. We're struggling. I think we're in an adolescence as a company where we want to work with wonderful singers who often are booked out in advance. So we want to be planning our seasons in advance, but we also want to be breathing with the times. And that's an interesting tension.
I'll also just say that, sorry, just to add in there, that part of our response too, so I'm just so struck this whole week, it's only been 3 days, but going back, how much circumstance just gave us the opportunity to become what we are now. And those types of responses that we had to have early on were often just to limitations. I mean, so much of it has been limitations, and that's limitations in the space that we have, in the time that we have, in and even in casting. We've ended up, a lot of our earlier shows too, I look back and I think we got this motley crew together to put on a show, and we had to work with that, and then it would always drive us to these really new places. And somebody asked a question the other night about whether we like working with people who have learned a role already before they come in, or whether we like working with them the first time. And so many of our first seasons was working with people who had never sung those roles before. And then when we do the drag shows, we end up a lot of times with music that people haven't done before. And now we're moving even on a little bit later tonight into a whole new opera that nobody's done before. But all those things have given us chances to be responsive and sort of trained us, so that we can't help but do that even when we have more in place before each production.
I don't know if we have time to continue on that before, because I really want to get to the new work, because I do think that that is a way forward in terms of how we develop as much as the word nimble gnaws at me, it really is the point, the response time. And I think what you are all discussing is the ability to, with an opera like Blue, Tazewell Thompson, we were hoping that it would be a period piece, but it turned out to not be that, of police brutality. And it's silenced at the time where I feel like it could perhaps dislodge something. At the same time, this it being silenced might be just the very thing that is needed to reflect on the thing and then come back. So I think what we don't, with new pieces, and we're about to go into another one, they take, well, I'll speak for myself. It takes me a long time to write things, because mostly I clean off my desk. And so the moment that you're writing these pieces, and it's why I think limitations are really your friend always, not just at the beginning, to go with the beginner's mind of saying, what can I do with an extraordinary artist and an LED and my mouth? And that, just the idea of that is terrifying, because you see the humanity behind it. And so what about new work? Where are we in terms of their planning for it? Because that's a whole other pathway.
Yeah, we are thrilled to be commissioning our very first opera, and it's coming up, it's in process, and it is composed by our very own Dan Schlossberg, with a libretto by Amanda Quaid based on her play. It's a one-act called The Extinctionist, directed and conceived by Louisa, and music directed by Dan, or by Jacob. I always say that, by Jacob.
Yeah, and in terms of responding to the times, I mean, what we're in the baby stages of thinking about is conceiving of this piece as something that can be a true hybrid, in the sense that maybe there are 50 people gathered in a space who watch the story unfold, and then maybe there are 100 people on Zoom who are watching the same thing sort of from a radically different angle, kind of reflecting the schizophrenia of our lives at the moment, which are, largely happening in these little squares that we're all looking at. But I really want to tackle that question of what's happening to us and technology in this pandemic. So, as many of you might remember, our 2019 drag show Hot Mama celebrated the beauty of Mother Nature in the shape of a fabulous drag queen against the horror of climate destruction, also embodied by a terrifying drag queen. Now we're waking up to terrifying news of wildfires and superstorms and floods every day. So this question of, what is the world that we are leaving behind for our children is really driving us. In our opera, a young woman asks a provocative question. What if the only way to save our planet was to stop having children? Instead, she will advocate for humanity's voluntary extinction. She will become the first extinctionist. So Dan is in the earliest stages of cooking the music, assembling the spices. It is, Jeanine, as I'm sure you might testify, so rare for a composer to even let anybody, let alone 80 people on Zoom, into his kitchen at this fragile state. So we're just super happy, Dan, that you're agreeing to give us a little preview. Over to you.
That's who hears my music.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Louisa. So I'm just going to give you a little taste as best I can on my humble piano in my humble workspace. So what I'm going to preview a bit is the central moment in this piece, and the woman is talking now to her unborn child. And obviously you're going to have to imagine a singer. I would not want to subject you to that. And the orchestration will be for guitar, percussion, and piano, with viola added at the end. So I started with this very simple rhythmic idea of actually fittingly a heartbeat, haunting her, 2 heartbeats, and that kind of becomes this childlike music box motif. And then that also becomes this weeping motif with appoggiaturas. So she imagines the child growing up in an increasingly uninhabitable world. She gets very passionate. She says to the child, I have to look at you and say, I made you so I could feel perfect love at last. And then in a kind of final burst, she imagines the child imploring her, protect me, protect me. And so you'll hear the heartbeat motif and the weeping motif kind of in literal waves of sound kind of crashing over her. So I'll play just the end and again, imagining a singer over this. That heartbeat brings us to the end. So that's a little sneak peek.
Bravo, Dan.
Bravo.
I know we all can't wait to be back together in the same room, sharing the miracle of live performance. And I'm crossing fingers that maybe this spring, some of us can be together again. While The Extinctionist is cooking, we are also creating Breathing Free, a theatrical virtual song cycle. This year, as we reckon with the murder of George Floyd and too many others, and as the pandemic ravages our fellow citizens in prison, we are choosing to curate a song cycle, mingling excerpts from Fidelio with pieces by Black composers and lyricists like Harry T. Burleigh and Langston Hughes. So we'll be creating vivid music videos like Florestan's aria by Beethoven, up alongside Malcolm X's aria by Anthony Davis. We're sharing this work in a robust education program with high school groups and a broader way. And this project is about taking anti-racist action here and now and manifesting a dream of justice and breathing free for all of us. Thank you to the Eric Holder Initiative at Columbia University for its generous support of this project.
It has been a really great joy tonight to get to talk with Jeanine and to get to talk about the bright future of opera and what it might become. I also want to talk to you briefly tonight about our more immediate future. So I'm so happy we have a great crowd tonight. It's amazing to see so many wonderful donors back with us for multiple nights. I want to thank you so much from all of us. And to our friends who are supporting us in other ways by spreading the word, by growing our community, or just even by showing up to these events, and especially to those of you who have heard me give this speech already for 2 nights, we are so grateful.
Yes.
But the arts are in a dire moment right now, as Louisa was mentioning before. With each federal and state plan for reopening, it's becoming starkly clear that we are deemed the least essential of all businesses. There's no safety net for the arts. We're not waiting on a bailout for opera companies. We've made it this far on the strength of your support. And so we want to ask you to keep championing Heartbeat's work. With your generosity, we're not only going to survive this crisis, this moment, this pandemic, we're going to go on to create more meaningful work. And now we have friends and fans, thanks to our virtual programming all over the world. And we have pride for what we have made against the odds this year.
While the pandemic has certainly been devastating for arts organizations, it is the individual people, the artists, that feel the brunt of it. And when you support Heartbeat, you support artists. 85% of our operating budget this year will go towards supporting artists. We know there are many urgent causes at the moment. Please remember to vote this fall, for example. But if you are able, please support us. So for our 7th birthday, we are launching a special campaign with the secret sauce, which is, drumroll, 70 new donors and $7,000 in 7 days. Any size donation counts, whether it's $7, $700, 700 million, 1,000, billion. We thank you profoundly.
You can, and the dog, yes. You can also support us, straight face, you can support us a lot by following us on social media, tagging us in your posts, and giving us a review on Facebook. All these things really help spread the word about Heartbeat. We hope that you will come back to check out another soiree this week. We have more shows until Sunday, and each one features a unique menu of videos and a different special guest moderator, stimulating fresh conversations. Though the bar has been set incredibly high tonight. Thank you so much, Jeanine, for an amazing conversation and for your wonderful presence and thoughts tonight.
It was wonderful just to spend any amount of time, and thank you for what you have given all of us. It all comes at a cost itself. So I'm incredibly grateful.
We really love you, Jeanine, and look up to you so much. You're a huge inspiration to us. So thank you for being with us. And thank you to all of you out there in the Zoom room for joining us tonight. We invite you actually to turn your videos back on now, and we'll begin some talkbacks momentarily. We're very excited to hear your questions. But first, I want to give a shout out to our house manager, Siobhan, and our stage manager, Alyssa, to all of the artists who are here tonight. We have so many beloved alumni in the crowd. I'd like us to raise our glasses high. Here's to the first 7 years of chefs and foodies, artists and audiences who stewed and relished the secret sauce.
And here's to the movement that is Heartbeat Opera in the next 7 years. Cheers!
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 Cheers!